There are nights at Hogwarts that feel like warm whispers. So soft, familiar, and comforting, as if the castle itself is tucking every student gently into bed. And then there are nights when something unusual stirs, not loudly, not urgently, but quietly, like a thoughtful pause before a dream begins. Tonight's tale belongs to such a night, a peaceful evening touched by mystery so gentle it feels like drifting into a soft cloud. It is the story of the night the Sorting Hat, one of the most ancient and trusted magical artifacts in the wizarding world, simply disappeared. Our story begins long after dinner, when the candles suspended in the great hall floated lower than usual, their golden flames flickering lazily, as if they, too, were ready to sleep. The sky above the enchanted ceiling shimmered with a calm blanket of stars, glowing softly through a veil of drifting clouds. Students moved quietly through the corridors, their laughter gentle, their footsteps slow, carrying the quiet satisfaction that comes at the end of a long day of classes, homework, and small adventures. Outside the castle, the grounds lay peaceful under a cool night breeze. The black lake mirrored the stars like a polished obsidian mirror. Hagrid's hut glowed softly in the distance, warm light spilling from its windows as Fang snored somewhere inside. Even the whomping willow swayed lightly, as though dreaming instead of guarding. Inside, the portraits along the corridors shifted in their frames, sighing softly as they settled into their nighttime chatter. Suits of armor stood silently, like loyal sentinels, reflecting the gentle torchlight that danced across the stone floors. Everything seemed perfectly normal, perfectly still, and yet something subtle lingered in the air. Not alarming, not frightening, just different, like a single misplaced note in a familiar lullaby. This is the night Harry, Hermione, and Ron, though longing for their beds, found themselves wrapped in a quiet mystery. A mystery so soft and thoughtful that it felt more like a dream forming than a riddle demanding to be solved. If you're curled up somewhere comfortable right now, listening as the world around you calms down, you're in the perfect place for this story. Take a gentle breath and let the warm glow of Hogwarts surround you. Let your imagination drift through its candlelit halls and moon-washed courtyards. Let yourself feel the peace of the castle at night, where magic hums softly like a lullaby. And before we begin our journey, if you enjoy drifting into these magical bedtime tales, if you enjoy the quiet mysteries, the soft adventures, and the warm comfort of calm storytelling, feel free to like this video, subscribe, and join us for more gentle stories from the wizarding world. Only if you wish. Our tale will unfold softly either way. Now, settle in. The candles are dim, the halls are quiet, and somewhere in the heart of Hogwarts, the Sorting Hat has vanished, beginning a gentle mystery that will slowly unfold under the sleepy glow of starlight. In the soft hush that settled over Hogwarts that evening, the familiar warmth of the castle's corridors wrapped gently around the three students who would soon find themselves at the heart of a mystery far quieter and far more curious than anything they had faced before. And at the center of them was Harry Potter, whose round glasses glimmered faintly in the torchlight as he walked slowly toward the great hall, unaware that something unusual had already begun to shift in the castle's rhythm. Harry, though known for many extraordinary adventures, carried himself tonight with an easy calm. His steps were unhurried, his posture relaxed, his mind softened by the peaceful stillness that often came with the first week of term. He had been looking forward to a quiet night, perhaps a cup of warm pumpkin juice, and maybe, if he was lucky, no sudden surprises. He wasn't expecting to become the one who would notice the first sign of the Sorting Hat's disappearance. Just ahead of him, Hermione Granger walked with her usual grace, a book tucked carefully against her chest. She loved the return to Hogwarts routines, the smell of fresh parchment, the glow of floating candles, the gentle hum of magical life moving through the castle. Her hair, soft and slightly frizzy, caught every bit of candlelight, making her look, at least to Harry, like she carried a small halo of brightness wherever she went. Hermione wasn't just brilliant. She had a steady, comforting presence, and even the castle seemed to calm around her. Beside her strolled Ron Weasley, hands tucked in his pockets, expression half sleepy, half curious, as though he couldn't decide whether he was hungry, tired, or simply content. His freckles glowed warmly in the torchlight, and every now and then he nudged Hermione with a quiet comment or made Harry chuckle with a sleepy remark. Ron had always been a comforting constant, a friendly warmth in any situation, and even tonight he carried an aura of cozy familiarity that fit perfectly into the castle's peaceful atmosphere. The three friends moved together in natural harmony, their footsteps echoing softly along the stone floor. Hogwarts felt safe tonight, gentle even, like an old friend welcoming them back with open arms. But there were others who would become part of this unfolding mystery too. Near the entrance to the great hall lingered Professor McGonagall, her posture tall and composed, yet her eyes softer than usual, reflecting the golden glow of the floating candles above. She gave the trio a small nod, one filled with the comfort of routine and the affection she rarely expressed out loud. Tonight, even she seemed more relaxed, her usually sharp gaze softened by the quiet atmosphere. Further inside, Neville Longbottom waved the moment he spotted them, his face warm and cheerful. He had grown more confident over the years, and Hogwarts's calm nights suited him well. Beside him sat Luna Lovegood, humming softly to herself, her dreamy eyes lifted toward the enchanted ceiling as though she were watching stars only she could see. None of them sensed anything unusual yet. Not a single student guessed that one of Hogwarts's oldest treasures, the Sorting Hat, was already missing. For now, the castle was peaceful, and the night was just beginning. Harry, Hermione, and Ron reached the top of the stairs leading to the great hall, expecting the familiar warmth of torchlight and the steady glow of floating candles. Yet, as they stepped inside, something felt strangely incomplete, as if the air held a whisper of worry that hadn't yet found words. The long tables stood neatly as always, polished by house elves earlier that evening, and the sky-like ceiling above shimmered with soft midnight clouds drifting lazily across a sea of stars. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal. Ron walked ahead, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "I know we're checking just to be sure," he mumbled, "but honestly, Harry, the Sorting Hat is probably just snoring somewhere in Dumbledore's office." But Hermione didn't agree. She paused at the center of the hall, turning in a slow circle, her gaze tracing the high windows, the shadows around the staff table, and the familiar stone pillars. "No," she replied gently. "Something feels off, almost as if something important is missing from the room." Her voice softened further. "And it isn't just the hat, it's the silence." Harry felt it too. Hogwarts had its own sort of hum, a quiet, living heartbeat, a subtle, magical presence that he had sensed ever since his first night in the castle. But now, that presence felt oddly muted, like someone dimming the lanterns of the castle's soul. He walked toward the staff table, looking for the tall stool where the Sorting Hat always rested during the day. It was empty. Not just empty, untouched, no fold in the velvet cover, no indentation on the cushion, no sign that the hat had ever been placed there at all. "Hermione," Harry said quietly, leaning down to examine the stool more closely. "Look at this." She hurried to his side, her brows furrowed with concern. The cushion looked new, far too new. It was as if the fabric had been replaced only moments ago, and yet no one would dare do that without telling McGonagall. Something was wrong, very wrong. Ron exhaled deeply, running a hand through his messy red hair. "Brilliant. We're looking for a magical hat that can think for itself, talk for itself, and walk for itself. Maybe it went out for a midnight stroll." They both gave him a look, but before anyone could reply, a small sound echoed through the great hall, soft, distant, almost like a breath of wind inside a closed room. Harry turned sharply. The sound came again, drifting from high above, where the enchanted ceiling met the stone arches of the hall. A faint shimmer of light flickered there, like the ripple of water touched by moonlight. "Did you see that?" Hermione whispered, stepping closer to Harry. "I did," Harry replied softly. Ron squinted at the ceiling. "What am I supposed to be seeing? Stars? Clouds? A giant blinking moon?" "No," Hermione said with gentle suspense in her voice. "Something else. A spark, like a spell that's trying to work but can't." Harry felt a shiver drift down his spine, not of fear but of curiosity, that gentle kind of wonder Hogwarts often gave him, even in strange moments like this. He walked toward the center of the room, craning his neck upward. The shimmering light glowed again, this time brighter, forming a faint circular outline, the shape of a halo pressed into the sky. It hovered for only a second before dimming softly, like a candle being blown out. Hermione whispered, "It's reacting to something, or someone." Harry lifted his wand out of habit, but paused. The moment he raised it, a quiet pulse traveled through the hall, a soft thrum, like the castle waking up or sighing in relief. His wand glowed faintly at the tip, though he hadn't cast anything. For just an instant, the magical hum of Hogwarts returned, brushing against his senses like a warm breath of recognition. Then, just as quickly, it faded away. Ron's eyes widened. "Harry, did your wand just do that on its own?" Harry nodded slowly. "It's like Hogwarts is trying to tell us something. Hermione stepped even closer to the center of the hall, noticing a pale glimmer on the floor beneath the halo of fading light. "There's something here," she murmured. She knelt, brushing her fingers gently across the cold stone. The dust was disturbed, not by footprints, but by something gliding, sweeping, leaving behind a faint circular pattern. "A hat," she breathed. "This is the shape of a hat." Ron knelt beside her. "Oh, that's not creepy at all. A glowing, floating hat leaving marks in the dust. Totally normal." Harry didn't answer. That gentle shiver of wonder returned, stronger this time. "I think the Sorting Hat was here, just moments before we arrived." Hermione nodded, and something made it vanish, or transported it, like it was pulled through a spell we couldn't see. Ron frowned. But who would steal the Sorting Hat? It's not exactly a shiny gem or a legendary sword. Hermione gave him a patient look. "Ron, it's one of the oldest magical objects in the wizarding world. It contains enchantments from the founders themselves. It can read minds, predict futures, and sense the deepest parts of a student's identity. It's a source of ancient magic, the kind of magic someone might desperately want." Just then, another soft sound echoed, a whisper, faint, fleeting, as gentle as silk sliding across stone. They all froze. Hermione whispered, "Did you hear that?" Harry nodded. It sounded like words, like someone saying something just out of reach. Ron swallowed. "If it's the hat whispering, I vote we don't listen to anything it has to say in the middle of the night." But Hermione shook her head. "No, it wasn't the hat. The voice came from above." They all looked upward again. This time, the shimmering circle reappeared, brighter, more defined. Only now, instead of fading, it gently descended, lowering itself through the ceiling like a moonbeam slipping into the room. The closer it came, the more the air around them softened with a gentle hum, the magic becoming warm and familiar. Hermione whispered, "It's a projection spell, but ancient, very ancient." The shimmering light stopped just above their heads. A soft outline formed within it, the shape of a tall hat with a crooked tip. Ron gasped softly. "It is the Sorting Hat." But the hat was different, more translucent, glowing with a pale blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. A soft voice drifted down, distant yet kind, tired yet knowing. "Seek the path beneath the silence." Hermione gasped, covering her mouth. "It's a message." Harry stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Where are you? What happened?" The glowing image flickered, dimmed, then brightened again with a soft, trembling sigh. "Stolen by shadows, forgotten beneath the halls." Ron whispered, "Shadows? Beneath the halls? Oh no, that sounds very undergroundish and spooky." Before they could ask another question, the projection flickered more violently. The soft hum dissolved into stillness. The glowing outline of the hat folded inward, shrinking until it vanished with a final whisper, "Find me." The hall fell quiet, deeply quiet, not frightening, just still, like the moment between breaths. Hermione stood slowly. "Harry, Ron, the Sorting Hat wasn't just taken, it was calling for help." Harry nodded, feeling a soft resolve settle over him, not rushed, not fearful, but calm and steady, like the gentle flow of the night outside. Then we'll find it. Ron exhaled, looking from one friend to the other. And how exactly do we do that? Hermione smiled faintly. By following the only clue we have, the path beneath the silence. Harry nodded again, sensing that their peaceful midnight adventure had only just begun. And somewhere deep in the castle, beneath floors that had held secrets for centuries, a faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat, waiting for them to discover it. Night wrapped its soft arms around Hogwarts, dimming the corridors into gentle shadows as Harry, Hermione, and Ron continued their quiet search for the Sorting Hat. The castle seemed even calmer than before, so calm that every footstep echoed like a whisper of its own. The torches burned lower now, flickering in sleepy gold tones that wavered across the stone walls, making everything feel softer, dreamier, and slower. Even the suits of armor looked as if they were drifting into slumber. The trio moved through the quiet corridors, still puzzled by the first sign, the enchanted quill that had written without ink, hinting that the Sorting Hat hadn't disappeared on its own. But they had no idea where it could have gone or what could possibly move it. It wasn't like a hat to go wandering off. Hermione paused at the top of a staircase, her hand lightly touching the railing. Is it just me, or does the castle feel different tonight? Harry looked around thoughtfully. It does. It's almost like it's waiting for something. Ron sighed softly. I hope whatever it's waiting for isn't dangerous. I was quite looking forward to sleeping. His comment earned him a small, tired laugh from the others. But that gentle amusement faded quickly when a sudden sound drifted through the air, quiet, airy, and unmistakably strange. A whisper, not the whisper of wind or shifting tapestries, but a whisper that sounded like words. The three froze. Did you hear that? Hermione murmured, her voice lowered instinctively. Harry nodded. It came from somewhere around this corridor. Ron stepped closer to them. Brilliant. Talking corridors. That's just what we need. But the whisper came again, soft, melodic, almost like a song. It floated toward them from the far end of the hallway, where moonlight spilled through a tall arched window. The whispering grew slightly clearer, as though it was calling them gently forward. It's like someone reading, Hermione whispered, squinting into the dim light. Listen closely. They held their breath. The whispering continued, calm, steady, rhythmic, almost guiding. Harry took a slow step toward the window. Come on, it's trying to lead us somewhere. Ron followed reluctantly. I really preferred when hats weren't mysterious. As they approached the moonlit end of the corridor, the whisper suddenly dissolved into complete silence. It vanished so cleanly, it felt like someone snapping a thread. No echo, no fading, just gone. Hermione glanced around slowly. It stopped. Harry looked up at the window, where pale moonlight bathed the stone floor. The castle was silent again, still and peaceful, until a low hum rose from beneath them. Hermione turned sharply. What's that? The hum grew gently, like the soft vibration of a spell trying to awaken. A warm glow seeped through the old stones beneath their feet, thin lines first, then widening into gentle golden cracks of enchanted light. Right in the center of the glow, words began to appear on the stone floor, curling smoothly into elegant script. Follow the one who never sleeps. The glow faded slowly, leaving only the soft imprint of letters shimmering faintly on the floor. Ron blinked. Right. Anyone want to explain what that means? Because I don't. It's a clue, Hermione whispered, slowly kneeling to trace the magical writing. A direct clue. Harry frowned thoughtfully. Someone, or something, is trying to help us. But follow who? Ron asked. Who never sleeps? Peeves? Filch? Hermione during exam week? Hermione gave him a look, but she couldn't hide the small amused smile tugging at her lips. Very funny. Harry tapped the stone gently. Someone who never sleeps. Something that's always awake. His eyes widened. Hedwig. Hermione shook her head. Owls sleep, Harry. All animals do. Maybe the portraits? Ron suggested. They never truly sleep. Or the ghosts, Hermione added softly. They don't sleep in the normal sense. Each name they listed seemed to open new possibilities, but none of them felt quite right. The castle hummed faintly, so subtly it felt as though the stones themselves were thinking. Harry looked up suddenly. What about the statues? Hermione's eyes widened slowly. Statues don't sleep. They stay frozen forever. Ron nodded quickly. Yeah, but how are we supposed to follow a statue? They don't exactly move around. But Hermione wasn't looking at Ron anymore. She now gazed toward the far corridor, where the tall marble statue of Rowena Ravenclaw stood gracefully under a dim lantern. Hermione? Harry asked softly. I think the answer is right there. They approached the statue quietly, their steps barely making a sound. The elegant stone figure of Ravenclaw stood tall, her carved robes flowing gracefully, her hand resting on a stone book. Her eyes, though sculpted from cold marble, seemed almost alive in the dim light. Hermione whispered, as if not to disturb something sacred. Rowena Ravenclaw was known for her wisdom, her insight. Ron studied the statue. Do you think she's hiding something? I don't know, Hermione replied softly, but the clue said to follow the one who never sleeps, and statues never sleep. Maybe there's something around her, or behind her. Harry stepped closer, looking carefully at the base of the statue. Look here. A tiny rune glimmered faintly on the statue's pedestal, a rune that had absolutely not been glowing a moment ago. Thin and delicate, it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat in slow motion. Another clue, Hermione breathed. When Harry gently touched the rune, the soft pulse of magic spread through the air, not bright or loud, but like a warm breath of wind brushing past them. The statue shifted, only slightly, just enough for them to see movement. Ron's eyes widened. She moved, didn't she? She moved. Hermione stepped back. Something inside the statue, some kind of old enchantment. It's responding to us. Slowly, silently, the marble Ravenclaw statue turned her head just an inch, just enough for her gaze to point toward a narrow hallway leading into the deeper, older part of the castle. Harry whispered, "She's showing us the way." Ron stared at the statue, with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Honestly, I thought tonight was going to be peaceful. Hermione smiled gently. This is peaceful. It's simply mysterious. The soft glow around the rune faded once more, and the statue returned to complete stillness. The movement had been so subtle, so delicate, that the corridor around them felt even more enchanted, like they had just witnessed something few ever had. "Come on," Harry said softly. "Let's follow the direction she pointed." They stepped into the narrow hallway, which felt different from the rest of the castle. The air was cooler, the shadows softer, as if this corridor belonged to a much older era of Hogwarts, one that only revealed itself to those who truly needed it. The walls here were lined with ancient lanterns, burning with faint blue flames. Dusty portraits hung on the walls, portraits of witches and wizards none of them recognized. Their painted eyes shimmered faintly as the trio passed, as though they were aware but too sleepy to fully respond. Hermione whispered, "I've never seen this part of the castle before." Ron rubbed his arms gently. "It feels ancient." Harry nodded. "And quiet, very quiet." Their footsteps echoed softly, blending with the deep hum of magic that seemed to hum beneath the stones. As they continued walking, Harry noticed something unusual. The shadows along the walls were shifting, not in a frightening way. Nothing jumped or darted, but gently, slowly, like faint silhouettes moving of their own accord. Hermione noticed them too. Shadows, but no one is here to cast them. Ron swallowed. Brilliant. One of the shadows stretched slowly across the wall, drifting toward an old wooden door at the very end of the hallway. A calm feeling washed over them, as if the shadows themselves were guiding, not warning. The shadow paused at the door, then vanished into its outline, like ink sinking into parchment. Harry stepped forward. "This is it," Ron whispered. Do we open it?" "Of course," Hermione gently replied. "Whatever is behind this door is trying to show us something." Harry reached for the handle. It was cold, cold like moonlit metal left outside during winter, but steady, unwavering. When he pushed, the door opened with a soft sigh, as though it had been waiting centuries for someone to touch it again. Inside was a small, untouched room lit only by a single floating orb of silver light. Dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with old books and peculiar objects, tiny hourglasses, shimmering ink bottles, quills with feathers that looked almost translucent. In the center of the room was an empty pedestal. Empty, except for a single silver thread resting on top. Hermione gasped softly. A memory thread. Harry nodded slowly. But whose memory? And why did the Sorting Hat leave it here? The silver thread glowed faintly, swirling gently like a moonlit river in miniature. Soft whispering returned, this time calmer, like a lullaby humming through the air. Ron whispered, "I think this is what the clue wanted us to find." Harry stepped closer. "We're getting closer to the Sorting Hat." Hermione nodded deeply, her voice soft. "Yes, and I think this memory will show us why it left." The room felt warm, calm, and expectant, like the first step of understanding something important. The second magical twist, the shadows guiding them, the statue awakening, The ancient corridor wasn't frightening at all. It was peaceful, a quiet mystery, a soft secret waiting patiently to be understood. As the quiet hours of the night continued their steady drift forward, Hogwarts itself seemed to settle into an even deeper calm. The torches had dimmed to embers, the enchanted ceiling in the great hall had shifted to a softer midnight hue, and even the portraits had begun to doze, their painted eyes fluttering shut as though the painted stars above them had lulled them to sleep. Yet within this stillness, Harry, Hermione, and Ron found themselves unable to relax, for the mystery of the missing Sorting Hat settled around them like a soft but persistent whisper, urging them gently onward. They had left the Gryffindor common room behind, moving through the castle with slow, thoughtful steps. Their voices remained low, not out of fear, but out of respect for the atmosphere of the night, a night that carried secrets lightly, as though the castle were dreaming. Ron walked with his hands tucked into the sleeves of his robe, shoulders hunched slightly as the cool air brushed against him. Hermione walked beside him, fingers brushing along the stone wall as though reading something only she could feel. Harry followed closely, listening to the faint breaths of the castle, warm pipes humming through the walls, tapestries fluttering softly despite the absence of wind, and the distant creaks that always hinted at staircases shifting somewhere far away. They paused near the courtyard archway, where moonlight fell in gentle silver strands across the floor. Hermione leaned forward slightly, squinting at the faint shimmer of dust that seemed to drift singly rather than in clusters. "Something passed through here," she murmured in a warm, thoughtful whisper. "Something heavier than a student, but not large enough to be a creature." Ron scratched his head softly, equally confused but not alarmed. Maybe Filch dragged something along the floor, or Mrs. Norris? But Harry shook his head, kneeling to look closer. The dust had parted in an unusual pattern, softly curved, as if something round had rolled or floated past, not scraped, not pushed, simply moved. Harry rose again, brushing his hands together. "It matches the shape of the stand the Sorting Hat usually rests on." His voice was soft, not in excitement, but in a kind of gentle wonder, almost as if the stand slid away on its own. Hermione nodded thoughtfully, her eyes warm with curiosity rather than stress. It wouldn't be the first time Hogwarts animated something quietly. Sometimes the castle does things for reasons even the professors don't fully understand. Ron let out a quiet breath. "I wish the castle would leave us out of it sometimes," he muttered, though his tone was more amused than annoyed. They continued walking under the large stone archway and into the courtyard, where the moonlight spread across the ground like a soft blanket. The shadows of tall towers stretched long and smooth, gently curving across the flagstones. Somewhere above, an owl hooted, not alarming, just a slow, rhythmic sound that echoed peacefully through the night air. The castle looked beautiful at this hour, almost dreamlike. Leaves rustled softly, despite no visible wind, as though nature itself were breathing alongside the students. Hermione's gaze drifted toward the astronomy tower, rising above them in one tall, graceful silhouette. "Do you remember," she whispered, "how Professor McGonagall once said the The Sorting Hat was older than Hogwarts itself, older than the Founders' time together. Ron nodded faintly, and she said it had bits of their magic woven into it. Harry's eyes softened at the memory. Maybe the hat sometimes responds to things beyond the school, things we don't see. Hermione hummed quietly. Magic can be intuitive, especially old magic. Her steps slowed as she glanced around. If the hat moved on its own, perhaps it's following a purpose. Ron raised a hand gently toward her. Let's not start thinking it's walking around with legs. Hermione smiled warmly. No legs, but intention? Possibly. They continued toward the covered walkway, where the lanterns glowed faintly, each flame steady like a candle left beside someone resting. Their footsteps barely echoed. The entire castle seemed to be listening, but not intrusively, more like a quiet curiosity, the way an old friend might watch them thoughtfully. As they walked, they passed the stone bench near the courtyard fountain. The water there shimmered gently, rippling in patterns that looked almost like words. Harry paused, leaning closer. For a moment, the ripples formed round shapes, soft curves that once again resembled the impression of the hat's brim. Not precise, not alarming, just a subtle hint, as if the fountain itself had witnessed something move through the courtyard. Hermione crouched beside him, dipping her fingers into the cool water. The ripple patterns returned to normal, but her face remained contemplative. It's almost as if magic is leaving traces, she whispered. Soft ones, like footprints you can only see if you look closely enough. Ron exhaled gently. So, we're tracking an enchanted hat that might not want to be tracked. Harry smiled a tiny smile. Looks like it. They continued their quiet journey, moving past the courtyard and into the long corridor leading toward the central staircase. The portraits along the walls shifted in their sleep, some mumbling softly, others dozing so deeply that their painted chests rose and fell with gentle breaths. They passed one portrait of a wizard with a long silver beard who snored lightly, his hat slipping off the edge of his painted head. Ron almost reached out to adjust it before catching himself. The staircase was unusually still when they reached it. No shifting steps, no grinding gears, just a calm platform of stone awaiting them. They ascended with easy steps, their breaths slow, their robes brushing quietly along the railing. As they climbed, Harry felt something, just a faint sensation, like a soft breath against the back of his mind. Not a voice, not a call, more like a suggestion, a direction, a gentle tug toward the far end of the corridor that branched from the next landing. He slowed down. Hermione noticed immediately. Harry? He nodded toward the dim hallway. Something's that way. I can't explain it. Just feels like a quiet pull. Ron stared down the hallway, yawning slightly. As long as it isn't pulling us toward Snape's old storeroom, I'm fine. They followed the corridor, the air growing slightly cooler, but not unpleasant. The glow from their wands remained comforting, casting small dancing shapes on the walls. A soft humming sound reached their ears, not mechanical, not magical in the usual sense. It was almost like a lullaby, a tune without words, drifting lightly through the stones. Hermione looked around, deeply intrigued. This sound, it reminds me of the soft hum the Sorting Hat makes sometimes, when it's thinking. They stopped near an alcove where a tall window overlooked the darkened grounds. Through the glass, the moon hung low and full, casting pale light across the grass and lake. The forbidden forest stood still, wrapped in its own quiet mystery. In the center of the corridor, right beneath the window, lay another soft trail of parted dust, almost circular, almost too gentle to notice unless someone was already searching for signs. Harry lowered himself to examine it. "The hat passed here," he whispered, "or something carrying it." Hermione studied the air as if reading a spell only she could see. "It's not dangerous," she murmured. "I don't feel any threat. It's more like an inviting kind of movement, calm, purposeful." Ron nodded slowly, rubbing his arms as though the coolness of the hallway nudged him. "It wants to be found, doesn't it? Not urgently, just noticed." Harry stood again, his chest warming with quiet determination. "Then we'll find it." They proceeded deeper into the corridor, their minds clear, their steps steady. The suspense remained gentle, like a soft drumbeat beneath the melody of the night. Every new discovery felt like a nudge forward rather than a demand, leaving the atmosphere peaceful, even soothing. As they walked, Hermione mused softly. Sometimes stories aren't meant to frighten. Sometimes they're meant to guide. Ron let out a small hum of agreement. And sometimes they're meant to make sure we don't fall asleep on the staircase. Harry laughed quietly, the sound warm and genuine as it mingled with the stillness around them. And so, the three friends continued down the hallway, with the castle gently leading them onward, not with urgency, but with curiosity. The soft clues, the quiet echoes, the faint shimmering marks, they all formed a peaceful trail deeper into the night's gentle mystery. Their steps faded into the distance, wrapped in moonlight, wrapped in magic, wrapped in the calm suspense of a Hogwarts night that held secrets softly in its hands. The castle had settled into an unusually gentle hush by the time Harry, Hermione, and Ron made their way out of the Great Hall. It was that soft hour between evening and night when the torches dimmed slightly, the portraits grew sleepier, and even the staircases creaked less often. Yet, despite this peaceful blanket covering Hogwarts, the three friends walked with a sense of drifting purpose, as though the castle itself were guiding them. They weren't rushing, nor were they wandering aimlessly. There was simply a quiet intention in each step, as if the missing Sorting Hat still whispered faint hints through the corridors it once presided over. Hermione held her wand loosely at her side, even though spells weren't cooperating as reliably tonight. "I think," she murmured with a soft breath, "that we should start by treating this as a gentle exploration rather than a chase. The hat isn't running away from us. It's trying to show us something." Ron glanced up at her with thoughtful curiosity rather than the usual confusion. "So, we just follow the castle's vibe?" he asked, his voice warm and slightly amused, but not in a way that disturbed the calm surrounding them. Harry gave a small nod. "Hogwarts always leaves clues for those who listen. Maybe tonight, listening is all we need." So they slowed their steps, letting their eyes travel across the familiar corridors as if seeing them in a new, dreamlike glow. The castle felt softer, somehow. Shadows stretched gently instead of sharply. Windows flickered with candlelight that swayed like sleepy fireflies. The magic of Hogwarts, even quieted, still had a heartbeat. They first chose to explore the base of the grand staircase, not the stairs themselves, but the spaces behind and beneath them, those alcoves where students rarely paused long enough to notice the details carved into the stone. Hermione ran her fingertips over an old inscription, tracing the outline of a small crest, a sorting hat etched above crossed wands. It looked almost like a signature left by the founders long ago. "Look how worn it is," she whispered, bending closer, as if countless students passed it without ever realizing what it meant. Ron crouched beside her, inspecting it with an unexpectedly gentle eye. "Do you think the hat carved this?" he asked. "You know, back when it was still new?" Harry smiled faintly. If anyone could carve a picture of itself into Hogwarts stone centuries ago, it would be the Sorting Hat. They shared a quiet laugh, barely above a whisper, yet warm enough to ripple softly through the air. It felt good, this gentle exploration, like the mystery wasn't something frightening, but rather an invitation to slow down and understand the castle's oldest stories. Their next choice was to follow a faint trail of movement in the tapestries, except it wasn't movement, just a subtle misalignment. A tapestry slightly crooked, as though nudged by a breeze from someplace deeper within the walls. Hermione lifted the edge carefully, revealing the start of a narrow passageway, a hidden route, but not one they had taken before. It didn't look ominous, just old, as if forgotten by time. "Shall we?" Hermione asked softly. Ron peered into it and shrugged with a peaceful grin. "If this turns out to be a spider passageway again, I'm staying calm only because it's a sleep story." Harry laughed under his breath and stepped in first. The passage wasn't dark. It carried a delicate bluish glow, likely from some ancient enchantment woven into the walls. Their footsteps echoed quietly, but instead of sounding eerie, the echoes were soothing, like overlapping hums in an empty library. They found themselves in a small circular chamber with 4 stone pillars arranged in a gentle arc. Atop each pillar sat an object, a quill that refused to write, a tiny wooden chest that wouldn't open, a candle that wouldn't light, and a miniature stone replica of the Sorting Hat. Each object seemed dormant, the magic inside resting but aware. Hermione's breath softened. These look like early prototypes of magical tools. The founders experimented with enchantments here. Maybe this room was where they learned how magic interacts with choice. Ron tilted his head at the stone hat. Then maybe the Sorting Hat comes here when it's confused, or when it wants to think. Harry stepped closer to the pillar, holding the tiny stone hat. It wasn't glowing or reacting, only resting, still. Its presence felt intentional, as if this was part of the Sorting Hat's journey tonight. "Maybe it came here to remember where it began," Harry murmured, brushing a bit of dust from the pillar, "to remember how magic used to feel, back when it wasn't rushed or loud, when everything was slow and thoughtful. Hermione nodded gently. Then our job isn't to chase after it. It's to understand what it's trying to do. The hat is old, older than nearly anything else at Hogwarts. Maybe sometimes it needs quiet, just like we do. They left the chamber with a soft intention to follow calm pathways instead of logical ones. Tonight wasn't about strategy, it was about gentle intuition. So they wandered toward the Ravenclaw Tower next, drawn not by clues, but by the whisper that some mysteries required elevation, quiet corners high above the castle where the wind carried forgotten thoughts. Even the trip up the staircases felt soft. The stairs didn't swing or protest. They seemed almost drowsy, shifting just enough to guide the trio upward at an unhurried pace. At the entrance to Ravenclaw Tower, the bronze eagle knocker shimmered weakly, as though half asleep. When Hermione answered its riddle in a whisper, the door swung open with a sigh. Inside, the common room glowed with a deep indigo haze. Books lay open, but unmoving on tables. The large arched windows showed a sky sprinkled with calmer than usual stars. Everything felt still, yet watchful. Ron approached the nearest table and brushed his hand over a parchment. The parchment didn't react. No rustling, no ink shifting. It's like the whole castle is holding its breath, he murmured. Harry moved to the window, looking out at the towers glowing faintly. Wherever the Sorting Hat is, this is the mood it wanted. Hermione joined him. A night where magic rests, where everything is quiet enough to hear the oldest magic breathe. Their exploration concluded not with a discovery, but with a feeling, a guiding sense that they were close, that understanding the path mattered more than reaching the end. They returned to the corridor with a new softness in their steps. The castle seemed almost proud of them, and somewhere within the deepest quiet of Hogwarts, a very old hat waited for them to understand its message. The night had deepened into a velvety, moonlit stillness, the kind of gentle quiet that settled over Hogwarts only when the castle itself seemed to be breathing in long, restful sighs. Harry, Hermione, and Ron had wandered through more corridors than they could count, leaving behind echoing staircases, drifting candle flames, and enchanted portraits that had fallen asleep in their frames. Every step they took now felt slower, softer, as if the castle were guiding them towards something, not frightening, but important, something it wished to share only with those who cared enough to listen. Their search for the missing Sorting Hat had brought them to the edge of the castle's oldest wing, where few students ever ventured. Dust floated like soft silver mist, settling gently on stone arches that had not been touched in years. The walls looked older here, older even than the Great Hall, older than the first towers. Hermione paused as her fingers brushed an ancient tapestry fading into darkness. "Look at this," she whispered, her voice barely breaking the hush of the corridor. "It's a picture of the founders, but I've never seen this one before." Ron leaned in, squinting. "Is that Godric Gryffindor holding the Sorting Hat?" Harry nodded slowly. "And look, Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, Helga's cup, Salazar's locket. It's like a gathering of everything important." Hermione traced the embroidered Sorting Hat in the tapestry. Maybe this corridor is connected to where it first came from, she murmured. Then, like a faint breeze passing over them, the tapestry shimmered, glowing with a soft, pearly brightness. It was subtle, calm, nothing like the sudden bursts of magic they were used to. Yet the glow seemed to welcome them, gently pulling the air around it. "Did you see that?" Ron breathed, eyes wide. Hermione took a step back, her heartbeat steady but curious. "It's a clue, a very old clue." Harry softly touched the glowing threadwork, and as his fingertips brushed the tapestry, a small whisper drifted through the corridor, soft, gentle, like the voice of an elderly friend waking from a long nap. "Follow what has always guided you." Ron stepped closer. "Was that—" "The Sorting Hat," Harry said quietly. "It has to be." They followed the fading whisper until the tapestry loosened at one corner, revealing not a hidden door, but a narrow passageway filled with warm candlelight. Harry moved inside first, lowering his voice to keep the calm atmosphere intact. "It feels safe," he whispered, "like the castle wants us to be here." The passageway led them down a spiraling ramp instead of stairs, smooth stone, curving gently, like a soft descent into a dream. As they moved deeper, Hermione noticed faint carvings lining the walls, tiny symbols of the four houses, woven together in harmony. "It's beautiful," she breathed, "and so old. I think this was built when the founders were still alive." They reached the bottom of the ramp, where a circular room opened before them. The air was cool, peaceful, and touched with ancient magic. At the very center of the room sat the Sorting Hat, right where the light gathered like a quiet sunrise. Ron exhaled slowly. There it is, just sitting like it didn't send half the castle into a panic. Harry approached carefully. "Sorting Hat, why are you here?" he asked in a soft, respectful tone. The hat's brim curled slightly, like a sleepy smile. "I was waiting," it murmured, "waiting for the right students to notice something the rest have long forgotten." Hermione knelt beside it. "Forgotten?" she asked gently. "What do you mean?" The Sorting Hat sighed, a warm, ancient sound full of memories. "Hogwarts has stood for 1,000 years, it whispered, "but time changes young minds quicker than old stones. The houses have grown, quiet in their unity. Students worry about exams, schedules, rivalries, but they forget where they come from." Harry felt the calm weight of the moment settle over him like a blanket. "You left to remind them?" "To remind all of us," the hat said kindly. "Hogwarts is not built on spellwork alone. It breathes because of curiosity, friendship, trust. I went missing not to cause alarm, but to help you three see this room, to bring you to a piece of Hogwarts that remembers everything." Hermione's eyes softened. "This place, it's like the heart of the castle." "Yes," the hat whispered, "and it listens, to footsteps, to laughter, to the choices you make. Tonight, magic felt distant because Hogwarts wished to rest. Even spells need quiet moments, just like all of you." Ron blinked. "So, magic wasn't broken?" "Never broken," the hat said gently, "only paused, like a long, peaceful sigh." Harry, feeling the truth settle warmly in his chest, nodded. Then why call us here? Why only us? The hat chuckled softly. Because you three always hear Hogwarts when it whispers. The silence that followed was soft, comforting. The torches flickered like sleepy eyelids, lighting the ancient chamber in warm hues. Hermione placed her hand on the cool stone floor, feeling the quiet pulse of magic beneath. So this room, she said softly, was waiting for someone to remember it. Yes, the hat murmured, and now that you've found it, Hogwarts will awaken gently, with its heart a little lighter. Ron scratched his head. So this whole mystery was Hogwarts asking for a bit of attention, a bit of gratitude, the hat corrected kindly. Every place, magical or not, likes to be remembered. Harry lifted the sorting hat with both hands. It felt surprisingly warm, like holding something alive but peacefully resting. We'll take you back, Harry said, when the castle wakes. The hat's rippling brim bowed slightly. Thank you, and remember, the greatest magic is never the loudest. It is the quiet strength that keeps you walking side by side. Harry, Hermione, and Ron shared a small, peaceful smile, one that said they understood. They didn't need a spell to feel the warmth of that truth. The room dimmed into a gentle glow, the torches lowering themselves as if preparing for sleep. The carvings on the walls shimmered once more before fading into stillness. Harry turned toward the passageway. Come on, let's go back. And as they made their way up the soft stone ramp, each of them felt calmer, lighter, and somehow more connected to the ancient magic that watched over them, not with power, but with affection. The climax had not been loud or sudden. It had been gentle, warm, and filled with the quiet wisdom of a castle that had seen countless nights. And it was exactly the kind of ending Hogwarts would choose. As the soft glow of dawn began to gently melt into the dark blue sky above Hogwarts, the castle seemed to breathe out a long, peaceful sigh. Shadows retreated slowly to the corners where they belonged, and the warm amber of morning lanterns flickered alive in the corridors one by one. Down in the great hall, where everything had begun, Harry, Hermione, and Ron stepped quietly across the ancient stone floor, their footsteps soft and unhurried, as though the night's mystery had wrapped them in a slower, more thoughtful rhythm. In the center of the room, surrounded by floating candles that had dimmed during the night and were now beginning to brighten, sat the sorting hat. Back on its small wooden stool, back in the exact place it had vanished from, but somehow softer, sleepier, as though the ancient hat had simply wandered off for a midnight stroll and returned before anyone noticed. Harry approached first, his voice low and comforting, like one would speak to a friend who'd had a long night. You gave us quite a scare, he whispered, offering a tiny smile. The sorting hat twitched, the brim lifting only slightly, as though acknowledging the gentle tone. Hermione moved closer, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes warm with understanding rather than worry. Ron stood beside them, rubbing his eyes, still adjusting to the quietness of morning after such an unusual night. But the atmosphere around them was not tense anymore. It felt peaceful, almost grateful. The sorting hat spoke in a slow, tired murmur, its old voice softer than usual. "I only needed a moment," it said, "a moment to rest where the castle could not hear me thinking." Hermione's eyes softened immediately. "Everyone needs a quiet moment sometimes," she replied, her voice just as gentle as the hat's. The hat gave a tiny nod, folds relaxing. "You three," it murmured, "you have but always listened. Even when others rush, you pause, and that is why the castle trusts you." A faint warmth seemed to ripple through the hall, like sunlight arriving early. Harry exchanged a glance with Ron and Hermione, a silent understanding passing comfortably between them. There had been no danger tonight, only a quiet mystery that asked for patience, kindness, and a willingness to follow gentle clues instead of loud fears. As the morning breeze drifted in from the castle's long windows, bringing with it the scent of dew-coated grass and the distant chatter of early rising owls, Professor McGonagall entered the hall. Her expression was first sharp with concern, but as soon as she saw the Sorting Hat in its place and the trio standing calmly beside it, her shoulders softened. "Back where you belong, I see," she murmured, stepping closer. The Sorting Hat gave a sleepy huff. "Only needed the night, Minerva." McGonagall's stern face melted into something rare, something almost like fond amusement. "Then I'm glad you found what you needed." She turned to Harry, Hermione, and Ron, her voice lowering to the warm, approving tone she rarely used, but reserved for moments like these. "Well done, all three of you. Hogwarts remains very safe in your hands." The trio didn't need praise, but the warmth of her words still wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Together, they helped the professor prepare the great hall for the new day, letting the candles bloom brighter and the long tables stretch out in shimmering morning light. Students would soon be waking, unaware of the gentle adventure that had unfolded while they slept. In the quiet moments that followed, Ron leaned back against one of the stone pillars and yawned. "I think," he mumbled, "that this might have been the calmest mystery we've ever had." Hermione laughed softly. "And maybe the loveliest," she added. Harry glanced at the Sorting Hat, now still and resting peacefully. "Sometimes the castle just wants us to slow down," he said. And as they stepped out of the great hall, leaving behind the last whispers of the night and stepping into the warm, golden promise of morning, Hogwarts itself seemed to hum in agreement. The walls glowed, the air shimmered faintly, and the ancient magic of the castle wrapped around them with gentle gratitude, as if saying, "Thank you for listening." The night's mystery had closed softly, like a book being set back on its shelf, and Hogwarts, ever watchful and ever alive, settled into a calm, contented peace. As the castle settled into its soft and comforting silence once more, a gentle warmth spread through the corridors of Hogwarts, like a quiet exhale after a long and thoughtful night. Harry, Hermione, and Ron walked slowly toward the Gryffindor common room, their footsteps light, their hearts finally at ease. The glow of the lanterns flickered softly against the stone walls, casting dancing patterns that felt almost like the castle was smiling at them, grateful for the peace restored. The Sorting Hat safely returned to its rightful place in the headmaster's office, seemed almost content as it rested once again upon its wooden stand. Its folds had softened, the creases no longer pulled with worry or strain. Even without speaking, it radiated a feeling of gratitude, a gentle reassurance to the young trio that everything would be all right now. Hogwarts itself felt calmer, as if the ancient magic of the castle had wrapped its arms around every student within its walls. As Harry pushed open the portrait hole and the cozy warmth of the Gryffindor common room washed over them, the fire crackled softly, welcoming them home. Hermione gave a peaceful sigh, settling into her favorite armchair. Ron stretched his hands toward the fire, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. Harry simply stood there for a moment, letting his eyes drift across the familiar room, the soft red couches, the scattered books, the quiet glow of embers. Everything so ordinary, yet so comforting after the quiet mystery of the night. There was no rush now, no need to unravel more puzzles, no shadows waiting behind corners, no missing objects to track down. Just calm, just warmth, just the steady, gentle heartbeat of Hogwarts at rest. It was the kind of serenity that made eyelids grow heavy, thoughts drift like feathers, and the mind soften into a dreamy stillness. The night outside deepened, wrapping the castle in velvet darkness sprinkled with soft stars. The wind hummed like a lullaby against the windows, slow and soothing. Inside, the trio felt safe, wrapped not only in the comfort of the common room, but in the magic of the place they called home. And as they each quietly prepared to sleep, the sense of peace stayed with them, as light and warm as a whisper. So now, dear listener, let that same calmness rest gently upon you. Let the quiet magic of Hogwarts settle softly around your thoughts. Let your breaths slow, your shoulders relax, and your heart drift deeper into stillness. You are safe. You are warm. You are held in a gentle world of wonder. Allow yourself to drift into a peaceful, dreamy sleep.